first, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. This is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thank you very much for joining us. We are live streaming here out of the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, as we do every weekday starting at 1 o'clock. And today we are coming to you with breaking news regarding the latest court ruling in association with the potential National Guard deployment to the city of Portland. There's a lot that's been going on with this over the last few weeks. Lots of court hearings, lots of different things going on, but this is the latest news that we got here this morning.
Yeah, and you couldn't have said it better. Lots of hearings. This is not a very straightforward process on whether we're going to see National Guard troops in Portland, Greg. So pretty much what happened today, it was a status update conference between the federal government, state of Oregon, and Portland. It was all over telephone with Oregon District Court Judge Karen Emmergut. The press and the public were allowed to listen.
Okay.
You could call into a number and listen. And pretty much what's happening is Judge Emmergut says she will move to extend both temporary restraining orders of the National Guard by an additional 14 days. Now, there are two temporary restraining orders in place. This is where it gets kind of unusual here. So on October 4th, she issued a temporary restraining order that blocked the National Guard from the Oregon National Guard from deploying into Portland's streets. And then the Trump administration moved to basically send federalized troops in California up to Oregon. So then that caused
kind of circumventing.
Yes. So then that caused state of Oregon and Portland to ask the judge for another temporary restraining order that would essentially block the National Guard from anywhere across the country to deploy into Portland. So we have two temporary restraining orders right now as this case plays out in federal district court in Oregon. But those two temporary restraining orders now being extended. However, the first temporary restraining order, this is where it gets kind of confusing. The first temporary restraining order is being appealed by the Trump administration.
Okay.
And that is in the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals right now. And we could get a ruling pretty much any day now in the federal appellate court on that temporary restraining order. Now, in today's hearing, Judge Emmergut said she's going to extend the temporary restraining orders by an additional 2 weeks, so until the end of the month, basically. And she said that if the appellate court rules in favor of the Trump administration, then she will make a motion to dissolve that first temporary restraining order that blocks the Oregon National Guard from deploying. But here's the big unknown right now, is that second temporary restraining order that blocks the National Guard from anywhere deploying to Portland, the judge pretty much said today that she will basically leave that up to the appeals court on what that would mean technically for other states coming into Portland.
Okay.
So pretty much a lot of what we're waiting on right now is what's going to come out of the federal appeals court. And but while all this is happening, whether we see National Guard troops in Portland or not, there is going to be a trial that plays out about the legality of National Guard troops deploying into Portland on October 29th. It's a 3-day trial.
Okay. There's so much there to unpack. I want to talk about that trial here in just a second too, but to understand the restraining orders. So we've got the two restraining orders. They've been extended to the end of the month, essentially, for now. However, we're waiting on the 9th Circuit Court to rule on that first one, which has to do with the Oregon National Guard.
Yeah.
So if they rule in favor of the Trump administration, does that then mean the Oregon National Guard can deploy, or does that second restraining order supersede that and still?
That's the big question.
Okay.
And because in today's hearing, Judge Emmergut, who's the federal district judge here in Oregon, or a federal district judge here in Oregon, she said that would be a point of discussion for the appeals court.
Gotcha. For the 9th Circuit.
Yeah, for the 9th Circuit of Appeals. It would basically be up to the appellate judges to take whatever legal precedent they took in making their decision on the first restraining order and potentially apply that to the second restraining order that's more broad and bars any National Guard troops from deploying to the state. It really would depend on how those three appellate court judges rule. But Judge Emmergut did say that should the judges rule in favor of the Trump administration, she would immediately dissolve that first temporary restraining order. But the big question is that second temporary restraining order, would it have to go through the appellate process again, or would would the same or would the judges potentially rule the same legal factors play right into that temporary restraining order, so they would just go ahead and ask the lower court to dissolve that one as well. So it's really lots of moving legal parts to keep track of here.
That's an understatement. Yeah, right there. I mean, there's so much happening there. So really a lot having to do then with that Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and as Adrian said, we're expecting that sometime soon.
Yeah, they heard arguments last Thursday of last week. So we're coming up on about tomorrow will essentially be a week since that appellate court hearing. So when we don't know when we're going to get a ruling on that.
Yeah.
We could get one 2 days from now. We could get one 2 hours from now, for all we know. So we are literally standing by to see what that Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals says, because that will be the determining factor on whether National Guard troops will be able to deploy to Portland while this case plays out in the lower court, which is the U.S. District Court of Oregon, and that's all about the legality of the troop deployment overall.
Whether it's even, technically allowed.
Yes.
And could it happen before that trial? Yeah. So a lot depending on that'll shake out there. Now talking about,
I want to note too, in the lower case, in the lower court. So the main case, when we're talking about the overall trial of the National Guard deploying to Portland, that's in the lower court. The question at hand is whether President Trump has the right under a law called Title 10 to federalize the National Guard to protect ICE agents and other federal property in Portland. And that is weighed against what the state of Oregon and Portland claim is a violation of the 10th Amendment, which the 10th Amendment of the Constitution is all about, states' rights, separation of powers between the federal government and state government. So there's going to be a lot of discussion in this trial when it does happen about just the constitutionality of states' rights versus the authority of the president. So it's going to be a really fascinating legal process to watch, something that's rather unprecedented.
And that's happening later this month.
Yes, so the trial that will happen in the lower court on October 29th, we learned today that's going to be a 3-day trial. They're really wanting to expedite this process because they know that it's very timely. There's a lot of moving parts. Things on the ground can obviously change outside the ICE facility in a matter of minutes, literally. So it's going to be a 3-day trial. Both sides will have, the judge said that both sides will each have a day each to make their arguments, and then the third day will be, for cross-examination.
Okay.
So, we could potentially see an ultimate ruling by the district court in Oregon where this lawsuit started, by early November.
Okay.
Perhaps. And that's where, the temporary restraining orders come into play because, depending on how the appellate court rules, we might, the National Guard troops may not be allowed to come, while the trial plays out, or they could also deploy here, but even before the official trial even begins, because what we saw in California when the National Guard was deployed there, the same process kind of played out. There was a temporary restraint. California, LA filed a lawsuit in federal court. A lower federal court judge granted a temporary restraining order, but that was overturned by the Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, the same appellate court where the Oregon case is being heard right now.
Gotcha.
And in California, a federal judge ultimately ruled, I believe it was back in September, that the summer deployment of the National Guard was, in fact, constitutionally illegal.
Okay.
But obviously that was way after the fact, and the National Guard troops, all of that already played out. But what was really key in the federal and the troops ultimately going to California was that appellate court decision. That's a higher court than the Oregon Federal District Court.
Yeah.
So really, depending on how this appellate court decides, that's going to determine really what the next 2 weeks look like in Portland.
Gotcha. So they could take that precedence, that's now been set.
Perhaps, and that was what the federal government has argued in the appellate court. They were like, you ruled in favor of us overturning the temporary restraining order in California, therefore we feel like that precedent applies here. But there's also Oregon and Portland's rebuttal to that is, well, the situation in Portland is very different than what we saw in LA, which, from an objective standpoint, it kind of was. There were a lot more National Guard troops that were deployed. There were Marines who were deployed. There were, demonstrations going on across the city.
Yeah. Much bigger demonstrations.
The highway being shut down.
Yeah.
What's happening in Portland is really isolated to one city block at the moment. So it's this situation that's happening right now, there's factors on the ground that need to be taken into consideration, but there's obviously legal precedent too, and it's very interesting to see how it might play out. Yeah,
it's certainly unique, as you mentioned, something I don't know if we've ever seen anything quite like this. Because you also have the situation in Chicago. And now, does that factor in at all for what's going on in Oregon? Because I know there's an appeal going on there too.
It's its own process because that case is essentially still being litigated.
Gotcha.
What's happening there really hasn't been brought up that much in the Oregon process.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that lawsuit is still being litigated.
Gotcha.
So what happened over the summer in California, that's already all kind of played out. In federal court, there's already been, concrete rulings on that. And, you've also seen California, the Attorney General there, and Governor Gavin Newsom, file briefs in support of Oregon in this case. So California is actually deliberately involving themselves in Oregon's case.
Gotcha.
It's it's a very interesting process.
It is a lot to follow along with, and that's why I'm glad you're doing that and going through and getting out the essential details out of all of that, because those are long. That's a long phone call you were listening to this morning.
Yes.
A lot of legal information coming through there, but to boil it down, so that's where we're at. So waiting on that ruling from the Ninth Circuit Court could come 2 minutes from now, could come 2 days from now. When we have that, of course, we'll bring that to you as soon as we have it as well to get that to you. And then also the trial coming up on October 29th. So that's going to happen regardless of whatever this ruling is.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And, and really, that trial could play out with or without National Guard troops on the ground.
Gotcha.
So
a lot to find out. It's going to be a busy week here, figuring that out and everything else. Well, Adrian, thank you, for being here to bring that information, and that's what we're doing here now. If you want to go through all of this, we, of course, will have articles up at kptv.com. You can follow along with all the backstory of everything, every facet of this that we've been covering, from what's going on at the ICE facility to the court rulings to National Guard. It's all there for you to follow up on. And here at Fox 12 Now, and of course across Fox 12 Oregon, we'll bring you the latest as soon as we find out. So this is Adrian coming pretty much straight here to tell us what happened here this morning. And then, like I said, if that court ruling happens, we'll have that for you, or anything else. We'll bring that to you here. So I suggest downloading those Fox 12 Oregon apps. If you don't have those, great way to get the notification of, hey, here's what's happening that's going to affect you, whether it's this or any other breaking news that we'll have here. So, Adrian, thanks, and thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to take a break here for just a little bit. I'll be back with some regular programming for Fox 12 Now throughout the afternoon, and if breaking news happens, I'll be here with that as well. So, I'll talk to you in about 15 minutes or so. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.